sudden, the world record once again had an incredible time save potential. We knew from Exarion's run that a 150 was possible, so Worcester and Exarion each took their turns taking the world record back to where it needed to be in September 2014.
Would have been a better run than this. I'm like really happy with that though. Like that's just because like second full run on console.
Gonna save me. 151. 151. Yes. Very nice. Very nice.
It's what I needed. Oh man.
To push the run to 149, however, would take the help of some more work from Exarion. He made this incredibly extensive Google document that detailed different ways to play out the end of the game depending on what DVs your Nidoking had. Depending on your attack, speed, and special values, it would tell you the optimal order to go through the last gyms, the order to use certain items, among a bunch of other things. So, more runs that made it deep late into the game now have potential to be a world record. This turned out to be the key that Exarion needed for a new world record. In January 2015, he became the first person to complete a sub 150 run of Pokemon Red.
Like this is surreal. More than my original. It's not just that I got the 149, I played so solidly.
And he did play so solidly. His work making the spreadsheet paid off, and he finished off a run that wouldn't be challenged for a long time. In fact, 10 months passed without anybody being able to even tie Exarion's 149. But in November 2015, a Pokemon speedrunner by the name of Swap was in the middle of an any percent glitchless attempt of Pokemon Red. His personal best was around the 2-hour mark. Definitely not a world record contender, but a respected runner nonetheless. On this particular run, he entered into the bike shop and opened the bike shop menu, prepared to use a bike voucher. He realized that he didn't have a bike voucher to use, however, and continued playing through the game, lamenting over his mistake.
Wow. Yeah, I did just do that.
But something strange then happened. Every time after that point where text appeared on the screen for fights, it didn't have to type out like it normally did. Instead, it just appeared instantly. Swap had no idea what was going on.
I am so confused.
His chat had no idea what was going on, and nobody in the community had any idea what was going on. It was quickly figured out though. When you enter the bike shop menu, the game sets a flag for text to appear instantly. If you don't have a bike voucher and exit out of the menu, the game never gets rid of that flag. All text then appears instantly just like it would in the bike shop menu, and throughout the whole run, this saves about 1 to 1.5 minutes. A runner named Gunner Maniac used this trick to his advantage to get a 148 run in February 2016.
148.
But hang on a minute, remember what this category was called? Any percent glitchless. Was this instant text trick a glitch? Think about it, you were more or less making the game do something that it was not intended to do. But then again, all that was happening was the game not bothering to reset the flag. The player wasn't doing anything strange, it was the game doing something strange. The community debated this for a while before Gunner Maniac's run, ultimately deciding that it wasn't a glitch. But after Gunner Maniac's run, the topic was brought up again, and it was decided that the trick wasn't allowed for any percent glitchless. So, this 148 got reclassified into a new category called No Major Glitches, and the any percent glitchless record was still Exarion's 149 from 13 months prior. Ultimately though, Gunner Maniac would end up tying the 149 world record a few months later.
149, baby! Let's fucking go. We did it. World record. That's a world record tie with Exarion.
However, thanks to a run with a huge time save in Mount Moon due to very few random encounters, Exarion fired right back in August 2016 with an incredible 148.
We'll keep going for...
A couple of weeks after Exarion's run, a significant change was made to all Pokemon speedruns. Historically, every game in the franchise had their runs timed with the in-game timer at the end of the game. On August 18th, however, the community decided that all future runs of Pokemon would be timed with a traditional, real-time timer from start to finish. There were a few reasons for this decision. The first one was that the only reason Pokemon was ever timed with the in-game timer to begin with was because of old rules from the website Speed Demo's Archive, where runners used to submit most of their speedruns for everyone to see them. Their rules said that if a game had an in-game timer, then all runs had to be submitted with that in-game time. Speed Demo's Archive reasoning at the time was that an in-game timer would be more accurate than any external timing method, but this didn't always end up being true. So, most games communities, such as Super Metroid for instance, eventually abandoned this practice. Also, with the in-game timer, it was possible that a run could be nearly a minute faster than another run and still be tied with it. The 149 that Exarion and Gunner Maniac both got, for instance, it's possible that Exarion's 149 could have been a 148.31 in reality, while Gunner Maniac's could have been a 149.29. Both of these times would have been rounded to a 149, so even though Exarion's run was 58 seconds faster, the world record would have been tied. Exarion's 148 world record was actually a 150.31 in real time, since the in-game timer tended to report times as being a couple minutes faster than the game actually took due to load times. So now, the new time to beat was 150.31 instead of 148, and the key to beating that time lied within a trick that had been theoretically possible for a long time, but was about to have its door blown wide open. This trick was RNG manipulation. For anybody who may not know what RNG is, it stands for Random Number Generator, and it's essentially just a fancy way of saying luck. So, it's a way of manipulating the luck in the game to get exactly the stats or items that you need. The quickest and easiest way of explaining the RNG manipulation is that the way the game determines what RNG it will give you is from the instant you start up the Game Boy, the game tracks your inputs, and based on which buttons you're pressing when, it will change the RNG that you get. Over the course of an entire run, your inputs will vary drastically, so controlling the RNG this way seemed impossible. But, if you saved and quit the game right before a point where you wanted something, be it stats or an item, you could turn the Game Boy off to get rid of the inputs that were already tracked, then turn it on and do the exact few inputs you need to load into the game. Based on what these few inputs were, you could then control what RNG you get immediately upon returning to the game. These inputs were usually fairly simple, stuff like holding A while the game powers on, but the difficulty that prevented people from utilizing it for so many years was that you needed a frame-perfect A press to clear the save info box the frame after pressing continue. You have a 1/60th of a second timing window to do this, so doing it repeatedly whenever you wanted to manipulate RNG wasn't going to be too viable. But then, that same August, People noticed a video called Pokemon Blue in 69 A presses where somebody beat the game while only pressing the A button 69 times. And funnily enough, this person was able to just hold the A button down all the way through clearing the save info box. This oversight meant that there was no need to do a frame perfect A press, since you could just hold down the A button instead. Initially, players found 3 places where the RNG manipulation could definitely be helpful. While more places have been discovered since then, these 3 remain crucially important. Before Nidobush, you could save and quit to get a Nidoran with a good level and good DVs. In Mount's Moon, you can save and quit to skip all random encounters until Rocket. And finally, outside of Surge's gym, you could save and quit to manipulate which trash cans the 2 switches were under so you didn't have to waste time guessing. With these 3 new tricks, so much RNG and randomness was now taken out of the run. Using the RNG manipulation to his advantage, Xarion was able to get a run of 149.48 in September 2016. Then, in early 2017, Gunner Maniac once again beat Xarion with a 149.41. Interestingly, the in-game timer was a 147 in this run compared to a 146 in Xarion's run, but the in-game time didn't matter anymore. The record was still Gunner Maniac's. This brings us to the most recent world record, 148.50 by PokeGuy84 in June 2017. The large time save over the previous record mainly came from a different late game route that involves fighting Giovanni first and getting Earthquake later, so you skip having to fight an optional trainer. But lately, PokeGuy has been trying to push the record even farther by using a trick known as Extended Manipulation. Extended Manipulation is essentially an extended version of RNG manipulation. Normally, you'd want to manipulate a Pidgey outside of Mount Moon so you can capture him by saving and quitting and performing the correct inputs to get back into the game to make him appear. But you also want to manipulate a Paris into appearing right after you get into Mount Moon so you can capture him as well. This would mean you would have to do 2 save and quits nearly back to back to perform 2 separate RNG manipulations. Turns out it's possible to play through the game from the Pidgey encounter until when you would need to do the Paris encounter with close enough inputs to still get the Paris to appear, without needing to do that second save and quit. But the amount of precise inputs you have to chain together is really difficult. In addition to the extended manipulation, a new early game route has been routed as well, where you skip the Route 3 center and fight the Route 3 last and pick up Mega Punch in Mount Moon. These strategies were all much more risky though, since you have less HP when fighting last. Nobody has been able to complete a run with either Extended Manip or this new early route. So, as of today, PokeGuy84's 148.50 is where the world record stands. Pokemon Red and Blue has certainly had one of the craziest speedrun journeys of any game out there. The any percent glitchless category may not have had the most ridiculous, game-breaking bugs of a game like Super Mario 64 did, or the insane optimization of a category like Super Mario Bros.
Oh! Wait, I don't know. Maybe.
But instead, a combination of rule changes, controversy, and the frequent discovery of new routes and strategies. And this is just the beginning of this game's world record progression. The new extended manipulation and early game route I talked about before will be used in the future to drop the game's time even more. There's also been talk of re-allowing the instant text glitch and merging the Japanese and American leaderboards. So, be sure to keep an eye out for any of the runners listed in this video, or possibly even a new runner, to continue writing this game's record history in the future. Thanks for watching. So this is the part of the video where I normally just have a black screen.
Summoning Salt merchandise is now available on Teespring. Check out the storefront right below the video. Enjoy! One of the fastest growing speedruns of the last few years is New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Close to 1,000 runs are on the leaderboard, a mark that not many games have reached. Naturally, competition at the top level is impressive, because not many people can call themselves a world record holder. A world record demands near perfection, honing in skills that come after thousands of hours of gameplay. Few people have gotten to that level, but those who have etched their place in speedrunning history. This is the world record history of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Let's start up here, at the beginning. New Super Mario Bros. Wii was released on November 12th, 2009. Normally it takes months or even years before a speedrunning scene develops around a game. For New Super Mario Bros. Wii, it took 4 days. People nearly instantly gathered in the Speed Demos Archive forums to route the game for a speedrun. In the following weeks, times of 45 minutes and 35 minutes were claimed by MWL and Chronorox, respectively, although neither have video proof. For the next several months, runner UC Pro would both route the game and complete speedruns, and in May 2010 he claimed the 2605, but once again he didn't record it. To get to the first recorded run, we have to jump to May 2011, when Riker Z uploaded this run, a time of 26 minutes and 56 seconds. Riker Z started in World 1. Level 1-1 is quite straightforward, where you want to run and jump through to get to the end as fast as possible. However, there are subtle optimizations you can make. Sliding down the hills gives you a slight boost of speed, and running through the checkpoint is the fastest way to power up. Riker Z also picked up the propeller mushroom for later. In 1-2, he tilted the Wii remote to create downward slopes he could quickly run down, and picked up a star midway through, which increases your running speed. In 1-3, Riker Z used the propeller mushroom to fly up and access the secret exit, which unlocked the cannon to take him to World 5. In 5-1, he had to deal with the water in the latter half, and he simply fell in and swam as quickly as he could. It slowed him down by several seconds. After 5-1, you're forced to run into the piranha plant on the overworld map, where Riker Z collected the 8 toad balloons, albeit with a bit of a slowdown. You then have a choice of either playing 5-2 or 5-3, and Riker Z picked 5-2. It's a pretty straightforward stage, where you bounce on top of wigglers and run through the rest. Next was the World 5 Fortress, a vertical stage where having the propeller suit helps immensely. Riker Z was able to propeller up from platform to platform, then defeated Iggy with 3 jumps on his head. The next stage was 5-4. This stage is intended to be an auto-scroller, where you ride on this raft while enemies rain down from these platforms above. It's designed to be long and slow, not ideal conditions for a speedrun. So, instead, Riker Z decided to implement the first game-breaking trick of the run. This was first posted by UC Pro just 2 weeks after the game came out, and takes some practice to get right, but thanks to the propeller suit and navigating and jumping at the correct times, it's possible to skip the entire stage by jumping on the platforms and blocks. Riker Z did so beautifully, making a few brief hesitations but still flying through. After 5-4 came the World 5 Ghost House, where Riker Z took the secret exit once again to unlock another cannon, this time taking him to World 8. The fastest path through World 8 consists of 5 levels: 8-1, 8-2, 8-7, the airship, and finally Bowser's Castle. In 8-1, Riker Z had to deal with randomly falling meteors, and he got hit twice. He powered back up, only to intentionally take damage again later on to boost through some lava. In 8-2, Riker Z once again took the secret exit to unlock 8-7, a hidden level that bypasses most of World 8. 8-7 itself is a long stage consisting of jumping from spine coaster to spine coaster. World 8's airship isn't an auto-scroller like in previous games. Instead, Riker Z had to run through and traverse it as quickly as possible. He picked up the propeller shroom again to jump across big gaps instead of having to wait and slowly bring the platforms down. The Bowser Jr. fight was simple, hitting him with 3 bombs that he dropped. And finally, there was Bowser's Castle. Riker Z used the propeller suit quite a bit to navigate at the start, which isn't always the fastest. The last part of the run is the escape, where you have to guide Bowser's heat-seeking fireballs to destroy the path in front of you, then navigate through an obstacle course to the finish. In all, Riker Z finished after 26 minutes and 56 seconds. It was a good starting point. There were some obvious slowdowns that could be cleaned up, but no huge mistakes or deaths, and the video quickly went viral on YouTube. Over the next several months, Riker Z would continue running the game to push his time lower. At the end of 2011, he posted his first new time, a 25:49. This run actually saved time over the 26:56 in every single stage. Most of his strategies were the same, but were better executed. In 5-1, for instance, he dealt with the water much better, jumping out earlier and just barely being able to make it to the end. One of the biggest time saves was in 8-1, where he managed to avoid getting hit by the meteors and didn't have to power back up. But the best improvement was in Bowser's Castle. He guided the fireballs much better in the escape, using 9 fireballs to clear the path instead of 18 in his old record. In 2012, Riker Z would get 2 more records, a 25:31 and a 25:27. These runs both optimized existing strategies and utilized new ones. In the escape, Riker Z was able to use just 7 fireballs to clear the path ahead, the fewest ever achieved. In 8-2, he picked up a star to get additional speed instead of damage boosting as Big Mario. And in World 5, he chose to play 5-3 instead of 5-2. It was a more difficult stage, but a slightly faster one if performed optimally. Riker Z had left his mark on New Super Mario Bros. Wii speedrunning. 4 world records in a year and a half. He stopped running the game. But then something very interesting happened. Despite years going by, and many new runners emerging, Riker Z's world record remained unbroken. The leaderboard grew, and players got better, but Riker Z's years-old effort was too much to top. Finally, in 2016, someone broke through. His name was Green Uprooter, and he beat Riker Z by 1 second. But unfortunately, he didn't record it. Green Uprooter had recorded competitive times before this run, and is a trusted community member, so his 25:26 is taken at face value, but it can't be viewed today. That left the world record in an awkward place. It had taken 3.5 years to shave 1 unrecorded second off the record. Now, there was no telling when it would be broken again. But in early 2016, a new runner was climbing up the leaderboards. Quickly, it became inevitable that he was going to be the next record holder. In April 2016, he officially did it, closing out a 25:23 to beat Green Uprooter by 3 seconds. But this guy wasn't just any world record holder. He had reached the top and he intended to stay there for a long time. His name was Ochgard. Ochgard had been around the speedrunning block before, achieving top times in Mega Man X3, Crash Tag Team Racing, and many other games. It makes sense that he was quickly able to get the record in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. But what nobody could have expected is that the very next day, he did it again, a 25:22. And the next day, another record, a 25:19. Ochgard had set 3 world records in 3 days. He was more consistent than any player who had come before him, meaning he hit tricks more often and made fewer mistakes. A big place he saved time was in the escape, navigating through the platforms quicker and hesitating less. And overall, he was able to execute most tricks more cleanly, shaving fractions of a second off in several stages. After these 3 records, Ochgard took a break from the game. Nobody came close to challenging him, with the closest active runner still being 16 seconds away. His skill level was far ahead of the rest, so he didn't really need to keep defending the record. But he came back in August anyway, and immediately got a 5-second world record. Ochgard's 25:14 was his smoothest run yet. He cleaned up a small mistake in 5-3 from his last run, doing a small jump to be able to run under the blocks while on the log. His 5-4 execution was also smoother, as he didn't pound the blocks he landed on and was able to continue moving. And in 8-1, he didn't slow down as much while propellering over the lava. These all added up to a few seconds of time save, and he didn't lose any significant time anywhere else. With a 25:14, Ochgard had pulled way ahead, 12 seconds ahead of second place, and 21 seconds ahead of any active runner. He had set a total of 4 records, and barring any new developments, it seemed like nobody else had a real shot of catching him. But still, probably Ochgard's most unlikely feat was the 3-day streak of records he had back in April. Even setting a record on back-to-back days is extremely rare, so extending that streak to 3 days, it practically never happens. Not only did it show complete dominance of a category, but it showed a level of consistency that was unrivaled. It was undoubtedly a once-in-a-lifetime accomplishment for Ochgard. Yes, from August 16th through the 18th, Ochgard once again set 3 world records in a row. Doing this once was staggeringly unlikely, but in all my years of research, I've never heard of someone doing it twice. All 3 records were 25:12s, but each one was slightly lower than the last. The time saves were minimal, but impressive in their own right. The first record had a particularly clean Bowser's Castle, the second cleaned up a mistake in 5-3, and the final shaved a fraction of a second on the rolling hills in 8-2. But still, these 3 records weren't good enough for Ochgard. 2 weeks later, he'd lower it again with a 25:10, his 8th world record. Ochgard was quickly approaching a barrier, a sub-25-minute run. He was 10 seconds away. Did he have that much time left to save? Well, there were still fractions of a second he could get from cleaner movement throughout the stages. In terms of stuff he'd gotten in a run before, all that time save would put him at 25:05, still 5 seconds away. But there was one other trick he could go for. It would be the hardest trick in the run by far, but it would get him to sub 25. This is 556. In the second half of the World 5 Fortress, the spiked walls move back and forth on a cycle throughout the entire level. Normally, with fast movement, you make it to the top, and then have to wait a few seconds for the spikes to finish their cycle so you can get to the door. Typically, you enter the door with 546 left on the timer. However, with unbelievably fast movement, it's possible to barely reach the top a cycle early. You can just fit in before the spikes move and block your path, and you wind up reaching the door at 556. This was originally thought to be tool assisted only, as the precision involved is truly incredible. Your moves have to be just right, where the instant you land, you have to be starting your next jump up. But in late August 2016, Ochgard became the first human to pull off 556. He just barely squeezed in before the gap closed, but with this, he proved that it was a human viable trick. It saves 7.5 seconds, since the in-game timer moves a bit quicker than a real second, which means that when combined with the stages of 2505, a sub 25 was indeed technically possible. So the goal was now in sight. With nobody else close to his skill level, Ochgard was the only one with any chance to do it. It was still a long shot goal, but at least there was a narrow path to sub 25. He would have to shave time off wherever he could, then nail 556 to get the bulk of the time save. If he could pull all that off, it would be an essentially unbeatable speedrun. For the rest of 2016, Ochgard played more than he ever had before, and over the next few months, this is what happened.
Oh my god.
You get it?
Yep.
You did.
Yes.
After weeks of trying, it had happened. The legendary, unimaginable sub 25. This was very close to being a perfect speedrun. At the end of a run that had gotten 556, that was 5 seconds ahead of the record, Ochgard was able to get a gold split on Bowser's Castle. It was the fastest he had ever completed the last stage in a run. His movement was impeccable, and he saved all the time he could. Ochgard could finally celebrate and take it easy. He had gotten his ultimate run, and there was no need to bother defending it. And so, he didn't. For the rest of 2016 and throughout 2017, nobody was really doing world record attempts in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. The community considered Ochgard's time to be essentially unbeatable, and it made sense why. First, you'd have to get 556, which fellow top runner Gix01 described as a 1 in 50 trick. Then you'd have to find a way to save time in one of the other stages. Ochgard did not leave much room for this. And finally, you'd have to match his incredible Bowser's Castle split, which ended with a 511 on the in-game timer. As 2017 progressed, people did improve their times, but nobody was close to 2458. Entering 2018, it really did seem as though Ochgard had achieved an unbeatable world record. Ochgard himself felt that maybe on the outer limit, a 2455 would be possible, by doing quicker wall kicks in 5-4, doing spins later into jumps in the airship so Mario moved faster for longer, and other small optimizations like those. He stopped short of calling his record unbeatable, but it's clear that neither he nor anybody else in the community felt there was much wiggle room. And then in April 2018, this happened. $24.45. How on earth was that possible? Well, certainly this run pulled out all the stops, like 5.56, right? No, this run didn't have 5.56, so it lost a little over 7 seconds. Well, certainly this time was achieved by an established runner like Ochgard, right? No, it was from a new runner named Fade Vanity. Alright, so what happened here? Well, Fade Vanity was a runner who quickly rose up the leaderboards in early 2018 until he had a low 25. He performed the 24.45 on April 13th, 2018, and other than missing 5.56, the run was incredibly smooth from start to finish. 8.2 in particular was fantastic, finishing with a nearly unheard of 4.24 on the in-game timer. But that's not why this run was the record. This run had a massive time save because of a huge new trick in the airship. And that trick is called Bombless. At the end of the World 8 airship, you have to fight Bowser Jr. The intended way to fight him is to wait for him to drop a bomb, then ground pound to send it back up to hit him. Do that 3 times and Bowser Jr. is defeated. For years, that's how players fought him in runs. However, in August 2017, runner I Love SMB found that in the world's 6th airship, it was possible to defeat Bowser Jr. by jumping on him 3 times, instead of using the intended clown cars. Runners then theorized that this could apply in the World 8 airship fight as well, which is what you do in an any percent run. However, the gap between Bowser Jr. and the top of the screen is smaller than Mario's hitbox, so despite players trying, nobody could fit in the gap to hit Bowser Jr. on the head. For a few months, that was the end of it. But in January 2018, former world record holder Green Up Rooter figured it out. The key was Bowser Jr.'s movement. He not only moves horizontally, but also vertically in a sinusoidal pattern, oscillating from a low point to a high point. So if you fly up to him, then perform a ground pound in a 1 to 2 frame window when Bowser Jr. is at the lowest point in his oscillation, Mario's hitbox briefly shrinks just enough to fit in the gap so you can hit Bowser Jr. If you're able to pull this off, it saves 13 seconds, an incredible amount of time for a run like this. The problem is, it's really difficult. The only way to practice it was to load a file with propeller shrooms, then play the second half of the stage over and over. When Green Up Rooter first discovered it in January 2018, it was thought to be an RNG related trick, because nobody could hit it with any consistency. In fact, it took 2 more months before somebody hit it in a run, when Gix got it in March. Doing bombless saves up to 13 seconds, but doing double bombless, where you skip 2 of the 3 bombs, saves up to 20. Triple bombless would actually lose time since simply ground pounding the other bomb is faster. But despite double bombless being theoretically known to be possible, nobody had ever performed it, even in practice. You'd have to hit the most precise trick in the game twice in a row. It just wasn't realistic. So that's what made it even more crazy when Fade Vanity got the world's first ever double bombless and finished the run as his 24.45 world record.
I did it! I did it! I did it! Oh my fucking god, I did it!
Sadly, Fade Vanity quit speedrunning in 2021 and deleted all videos of his runs. So, many of his world records are lost today, including his 24.45. A small amount of footage from this run and others were preserved in Connor01's record history video, so we can see glimpses of what he did. But when he set this record in April 2018, the community was absolutely shocked at his accomplishment. And still, there was clearly more time to save. He didn't get 556, so a run in the 2430s and possibly lower was possible. Fade Vanity was the new top runner of New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and while little footage remains of what he did over the next several months, his impact and legacy continue to this day. With time still left on the table, Fade Vanity committed to attempts, and went all out to drive the record down. In the early 2000s, one of the largest speedrunning communities out there was for the classic NES game Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Dozens of players from all over the world competed with each other to set the fastest times they could on each of the 14 fighters, tracked with the in-game timer displayed during and after the fight. It was a thriving community. These guys sent emails back and forth detailing their strategies, posting on old websites like Game FAQs, and kept track of their fastest times using online leaderboards. There was a really fun mix of randomness and skill involved. New strategies for faster times were regularly found, keeping the game fresh and encouraging others to see just what they could discover. For years, Punch-Out! Remained as one of the most popular speedrun communities in the world. But by the mid-2000s, competition slowed down. People kinda just stopped playing the game, and in a matter of months, one of the most played speedruns out there suddenly lost all of its competition, and silently faded into the background while other games took its spot. By 2008, just about nobody was playing the game anymore. But then, in 2010, a player known as Sinister1 became the first player to speedrun the game in years. What he found was a deserted community. The game FAQs pages with strategy discussion had been deleted, emails sent back and forth had long been forgotten, and pretty much all that remained was a website called Red Tom's Punch-Out!, with a leaderboard that showed what the world record was for each of the 14 fights. Sinister1 was shocked by what he saw here. All 14 records were held by the same guy, a person named Matt Turk. None of them had any videos for proof, and it was hard to even find evidence on how Turk did each of these fights. After finding Matt Turk's email address and talking with him a bit, Sinister realized a couple of things. First, all signs pointed to every single one of these records being legitimate. And second, Matt Turk's skill level was way beyond any other player in the world, and there was pretty much no hope in anybody else beating some of them. At least, that's what he thought. These are the 14 world record times that Matt Turk had achieved by the time Sinister rediscovered the leaderboard. They didn't have video proof to go with them, but especially given when they were performed, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Hardly anybody was uploading speedruns to the internet in the early 2000s. Turk did, however, write down some of his strategies in detail on Red Tom's Punch-Out! Site, explaining how he achieved many of his times and how others could do the same. He played the game for a decade and came up with so much. In my opinion, it's very likely that he performed all of his times legitimately. But to understand how good they were, we'll have to first understand the basics of the game. Punch-Out! Mainly involves dodging out of the way of your opponent's punches and hitting them with your own punches courtesy of the fists of Little Mac. Punching your opponent lowers their health bar and can eventually lead to a knockdown. 3 knockdowns in one round is a TKO, which will end the fight. It's also possible to KO some fighters, where they don't get up after Mario the referee counts to 10 and the fight ends. So, Turk achieved these 14 times from either TKOing or KOing each fighter. We'll break down how he did them later, but for Sinister1 to beat or tie most of them seemed out of the question. Thankfully though, 2 of them were world record freebies that anybody watching this could match with a little bit of practice. Glass Joe and Don Flamenco. Glass Joe is an infamously easy fight, and his world record is infamously easy to attain as well. His strategy simply involved waiting until he did his attack at 40 seconds. A well-timed punch to the face upon him charging forward will knock him down in 42 seconds, where he won't be able to get up and the fight will end at 42.00. Punch-Out runs at 60 frames per second, and there's 2 frames to time this punch for Glass Joe to get knocked down and stay down at 42.00. This world record has been at 42.00 probably ever since the game came out in 1987. The second relatively easy record is on Don Flamenco, the 4th fight in the game, with a strategy discovered by Martin Charlebois in the late 90s. To tie this record, Sinister had to punch him, dodge out of the way, then wait and punch Don Flamenco in the face on the last frame before he would block the punch. If he's able to land it in this 60th of a second window, he'll get a star punch, or an uppercut that deals more damage. To Don Flamenco, this punch does enough to automatically knock him down. He gets up, but upon dodging his punch and hitting him in the face 5 times, Don Flamenco goes down again and doesn't get up. It'll be a KO at 14.97 seconds, a world record that has been tied for at least 2 decades. Sinister tied both of those records in early 2010, but after that, it was going to be a lot tougher to knock any down. No more freebies. Now, he had to practice and try to improve his skills at the game. Throughout 2010, Sinister One got a lot better at the game and lowered each of his 14 times down, but they still remained comfortably behind Turk's times. Thankfully though, he got some hope later that year. A player known as Adelicott was interested in the Hippo record, which was another one that Turk had reached the theoretical lowest time on, 37.61. To pull it off, however, was another story. King Hippo is a super random fighter. On any punch he throws, he can either open his mouth or not. He has a 3 in 8 chance of opening on any given punch, and you can only hit Hippo when he opens his mouth. He needs to open his mouth 3 times in order for you to deal enough damage to beat him, so to get the fastest time possible, you need Hippo to open his mouth on each of the first 3 times he throws a punch. That's 3/8 times 3/8 times 3/8, or about 5.27%. But that's not all. Half the time, he also does a delay between his second and third punches. To get Turk's time of 37 seconds, he can't do that delay, which cuts the odds in half. So the sheer odds in getting the luck needed for this time were only about 2.64%. The execution was extremely precise as well, because of how the in-game timer works. It ticks faster than a real second, with an in-game second being made up of about 20 individual frames, or a third of a real second. For some reason, the programmers only made certain decimals possible to achieve on each fight: 0.00, 0.25, 0.48, 0.61, 0.82, 0.97, and 0.99. If you end the fight in the first few frames of an in-game second, you get 0.00. In the next few frames, you get 0.25, and so on all the way to 0.99. His time of 37.61 meant he could lose up to 2 frames before actually losing time and getting a 37.82. On average, you have to hit Hippo on either the first or second frame he opens his mouth on each punch. That is some really precise timing. Now keep in mind, even if you're able to execute that precisely, you only have a 1 in 40 chance of getting the correct pattern from Hippo. Sinister One's fastest time was a 37.97. But in October 2010, Adelicott came through and tied Turk's 37.61, which I mentioned before can't go lower at all. What's crazy is that even with all that randomness and execution, that was still considered one of Turk's easier records to match. With that, the Punch-Out community had managed to take down 3 of Turk's times. But these 3 all had something in common. Of Turk's 14 records, it was known that 4 of them were at their theoretical limit and couldn't be beaten, only tied. It had been known for years that you couldn't go under 42.00 on Glass Joe, under 14.97 on Don Flamenco, and under 37.61 on King Hippo, and all 3 of those times stand as the world records even today. But for most of the remaining fights, the limit on how low humans could go was unknown. Turk's times were incredible, but for most of them it was at least theoretically possible to take them a decimal lower. But in order to do that, you would need to either beat Turk's execution, or get better luck, or both. Enter Mr. Sandman. Turk's Sandman time was 220.00, the slowest of all 14 fights, but that doesn't mean it was his worst. You can't get star punches on Mr. Sandman to deal damage quickly, so even beating him in the first round is hard. We'll get into the actual strategy behind this fight soon, but in 2010, Sinister One was able to tie Turk's 220. It seemed like it was just another Turk time down, but then Turk actually responded and beat Sinister's time with a claimed 219.48, once again with no video. Super Mario 64, one of the most iconic speedruns of all time. Top level runs are beautiful. There's incredible movement, bizarre glitches, and awesome tricks. It all adds up to a super popular speedrun, giving Mario 64 the impressive legacy it has. But I've got a secret to share. All the gameplay you've just seen was performed with a blindfold on. This might sound too insane to be real, but for the past several years, players have been trying to speedrun Super Mario 64 without looking at the screen. How is this possible? How do you take a 3-dimensional game and not only play it with your eyes closed, but practically make it look easy? Let's take a journey inside the minds of some of speedrunning's most impressive players. Welcome to the world of blindfolded Mario 64. And now a word from this video's sponsor, Rocket Money. I don't know about you, but I'm subscribed to a number of streaming services. I try to switch between them, subscribing for a while before moving to other ones. Only problem, I forget to cancel and end up paying for a service I'm not using. This is where Rocket Money can help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I think Rocket Money is great for keeping track of your subscriptions. They identify recurring charges and cancel unwanted subscriptions for you. But they're also great for setting budgets. They can automatically monitor your spending by category and notify you when you've exceeded your limits. Rocket Money has helped save its customers an average of $740 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Join today by going to rocketmoney.com/summoningsalt, or by clicking on the link in the description to get started for free. You can unlock more features with a premium membership, but you can start off for free, so might as well try it and help out my channel. That's rocketmoney.com/summoningsalt. Blindfolded speedruns aren't a new concept. For years, blindfolded runs have been a staple at Games Done Quick events, and runners have even grinded at home to optimize blindfolded world records. But those were usually for simpler games. Compare that to Mario 64, with its 3D gameplay and wide open levels. Getting consistency with this seemed out of the question, and for many years, nobody bothered trying. But then, we arrive in 2017, when the main character of our story comes onto the scene. Meet Bubzia. Bubzia had seen players like RunnerGuy2489 and 360 Chrism play blindfolded 3D games before, and it inspired him to see what he could do in Super Mario 64. Bubsy started by figuring out a few basic stars blindfolded. From there, he expanded to the rest of the game. He slowly built up his skills throughout 2017. And finally, by October, he was ready to try for the first full game completion of blindfolded Super Mario 64. Here's how he did it. First off, this was a 16-star run of the game. Collecting at least 70 stars is the intended glitchless route, but that was not going to happen with a blindfold on. Instead, Bubsy performed a popular speedrunning route. Collect 16 of the easiest stars, then tackle a couple glitches to skip to the last stage. That was much more manageable than going for 70 stars. Right from Bubsy's first inputs, you can see his general strategy. He ran forward until he heard Mario hit the wall, then turned right and kept going. It was slow, but these inputs were hard to mess up, and he eventually made it to the cutscene. In Bob-omb Battlefield, Bubsy worked on getting to the top of the mountain for the first star. He used the camera angles to his advantage. He'd run forward till he hit an object, then carefully adjusted the camera and kept moving forward. This normalized his movement and lined him up so he'd always end up running to the same place every time. After gradually inching his way up the slope, he got to use audio techniques on the boss. He backflipped to pick him up, then counted the audio of Mario's footsteps to know when he was in the middle. This lined him up so he was perfectly underneath the star when it spawned. Bubsy ended up collecting 3 stars in Bob-omb Battlefield, and they all followed the same idea. Very simple and safe setups to reliably work his way through the map. He then headed to Whomp's Fortress, where he ultimately picked up 5 more stars. He used a plethora of strategies to get these, slowly backflipping up the long ramp, running from wall to wall, and even using a bit of muscle memory. His setups were so normalized that whenever something went slightly off script, he usually couldn't recover and either died or restarted. This happened 9 times throughout Whomp's Fortress. Bubsy continued through the game, slowly but surely collecting stars. While a lot of his strategies looked safe, they required an unbelievable amount of memorization and skill to do blindfolded. None were harder than the Bowser stages. He needed inside-out knowledge of the level to ensure he could platform without looking. He had a clever strategy for the Bowser fight itself. By constantly letting go and re-grabbing his tail, Mario gradually moves forward. Eventually, you'll collide with the bomb, and skip having to somehow aim a Bowser throw without being able to see. After an hour and 25 minutes, Bubsy had collected 15 stars. He had a precise setup to grab Mips the rabbit, and then counted Mario's footsteps to know when to turn through the hallways. To clip through the doors, Bubsy had more setups that involved re-grabbing Mips repeatedly. They worked, and Bubsy was through both doors after a few minutes. But then, he arrived at the hardest part of the entire run, Bowser in the Fire Sea. There are so many cycles, moving objects, and obstacles all over the place, that even with the best setups, Bubsy couldn't consistently make it through. He had a few smart strategies to help. By listening to silly kicks, he could tell where the platform was in its cycle. A longer distance between each kick meant it was moving down, and a shorter distance meant it was moving up. And later on, by backflipping onto this box, Bubsy knew that even if he took damage in the lava, he was lined up with the heart so he could recover. Safe strategies like these helped, but it still took Bubsy nearly an hour to get through Fire Sea, with 11 deaths along the way. But eventually, he cleared the level, and after 2.5 hours, he was in the home stretch. Next up were backwards long jumps, and there was no big secret to doing these blindfolded. He just had to line up and hope his mashing got him through the door and up the stairs. And finally, Bowser in the Sky. It's quite similar to Fire Sea in that there's several cycles you have to deal with, the hardest being the 2 elevators right at the very end. But thanks to a combination of backflips, audio cues, and normalization setups, Bubsy had made it through after 3 deaths. The final Bowser fight requires 3 throws, and Bubsy's strategy for the first 2 was letting Bowser run at him, then dropping him right into the bomb. But that's not an option for throw 3. So, he had to just randomly spin Bowser and hope he hit a bomb. One random throw away from history being made.
Okay, calm down. I need to collect the stuff. Calm down, guys. Please, man, please. It should be to the left. 2 backflips or 1 backflip. No, that's not good, Yes! We did it! Yes, guys! We did it!
Bubsy had shocked the world. He could literally beat Super Mario 64 with his eyes closed. Probably one of the craziest gaming achievements ever. Now, his run did take over 3 hours, and he either died or restarted 33 times across the game. There was room for optimization, if Bubsy so desired, but he didn't. He was the only person in the world capable of doing this, and he was happy to move on with his life. But little did Bubsy know, while he was working on his 16-star run, there was another player on the other side of the world doing the exact same thing, Z-Surf. Neither player knew of the other's existence, and Bubsy's completed run came as a big surprise to Z-Surf. He was still working on individual stars. This other guy was way ahead of him. But Z-Surf wasn't deterred. He talked with Bubsy, learning some of his strategies while improving on his own. He found different routes to take and ways he could complete certain stars faster. By the time he started full game runs in early 2018, he was a much improved player. Z-Surf ended up beating Bubsy's run by a few minutes on February 2nd, and a month later, he took a full hour off the world record. Mario 64 completed blindfolded in an hour and 58 minutes. A big part of the improvement was the fact that Z-Surf simply died less than Bubsy. He had to restart just 15 times across the run, compared to Bubsy's 33. But his route through the game was also quicker. For one thing, he opted to collect both Peach Slide Stars. He had a fairly safe strategy to leap over the edge and make it to the end before 21 seconds. That's fast for a blindfolded star. He also switched out a couple stars in Hazy Maze Cave to save a bit more time. But beyond the route changes, Z-Surf was simply faster than Bubsy. He used more audio cues to his advantage. For instance, in the Bowser stages, he could tell where the rotating platforms were based on what part of the background music was playing. And just all over the run, Z-Surf's strategies were a bit riskier, running up a slope rather than backflipping, and using fewer setups. Meanwhile, as Z-Surf was lowering the Mario 64 blindfolded record, Bubsy was working on other blindfolded games, most notably Pokemon and Kingdom Hearts. He planned to come back to Mario 64 eventually, but if nothing else, these other games were still helping him improve as a blindfolded speedrunner. He picked up on different blindfolded strategies and ideas while he played. And as the months passed, Bubsy realized there was one technique that might really help with Mario 64. Something that would make his movement look much more fluid, almost like he was playing with his eyes open. That fall, Bubsy came back to Mario 64, implementing a trick called beat counting. Beat counting is essentially using the background music's beat as a metronome to time your inputs to. Now, it's important to note that this isn't the same as a music cue. That's where you wait for a specific moment in the song to use as a cue. Instead, beat counting is simply having a consistent frame of reference, in this case the beat of the song, to help time different inputs. For example, you can run forward, then know to jump after 3 beats, then press jump again after 4 more beats, and so on. This can help make otherwise brutal sections become nearly trivial, as it replaces insane muscle memory with consistent inputs. Beat counting was first implemented in Super Mario 64 by a player named Katoon, who used it in his 70-star run. It helped him all over, allowing for fluid movement that looked like a visual player at times. After seeing it utilized in other speed games, Bubsy decided he had to try using it in 16 star. So, in September 2018, he came back to Super Mario 64. He wanted to see how much time he could take off of Z-Surf's record of 1 hour and 58 minutes. How much could beat counting help? Well, right away, Bubsy saved time on the very first star. He picked up a box and navigated into the corner of the gate by beat counting. By then setting it down on top of Mario's hitbox, he got pushed behind the gate and was able to collect the star. This is an obscure old trick known as box clip, and predates the more traditional bomb clip used in modern visual runs. New strategies with beat counting were used throughout the game. Often, these helped big time with consistency as well as being faster. The slide in Cool Cool Mountain was now beat counted, and Bubsy had a safer MIPS grab thanks to beat counting too. But the biggest time saves with beat counting were the Bowser stages, especially Fire Sea. As you recall, this is probably the hardest level in the run. It took Z-Surf over 17 minutes to get through it in his world record. But here, Bubsy used a beat count for the entire stage developed by Katoon. Highlights included a section in the middle where he navigated without adjusting the camera. Since he couldn't see anyway, there was no point in changing the camera angle. He still knew exactly where to go. Bubsy flew through the whole level, and ultimately, he completed it in just 2 minutes. A 15-minute time save over Z-Surf. That's the power of beat counting. Bubsy was cruising. The run was far from perfect, but after demolishing Fire Sea, he knew he was way ahead of Z-Surf's world record. He couldn't see his exact pace, of course, but he knew it had potential to be a big record. The backwards long jumps went well, and thanks to beat counting and other audio cues, Bowser in the Sky was quick too. Once again, it all came down to hitting this last Bowser throw. And then he could find out just what type of pace this really was.
Yes! Yes! Someone! 53, yes! Yes! Yes!
This was ahead of even his wildest dreams. Not only was it sub-hour, but it was sub-hour by several minutes. The whole game beaten blindfolded in 53 minutes. The run did have its slow moments. He died a handful of times, and the worst part was when he had to intentionally drown to restart in Dire Dire Docks. But being able to cut a world record in half did not happen very often. This was everything Bubsy wanted and more. Beat counting had changed blindfolded Mario 64 forever. But once again, Bubsy decided this was a good place to stop. Despite there still being room for improvements, he remained interested in exploring other blindfolded speedruns. So, he stopped playing, and for the next year, his blindfolded world record remained unchallenged. But of course, Bubsy wasn't going to stay away for long. 16 star was his bread and butter. And if you've seen my other videos, generally people who dominate a game can't help but come back to it time and time again. Bubsy wanted to see just how low he could take the blindfolded record. So, after a 10-month break, he spent the summer of 2019 rerouting the run, changing up the stars a bit and trying to optimize his strategies. By August, he was ready to start up runs again. And over the course of just 11 days, he did this.
I'm not happy, man. I'm not happy at all. No way, dude. Are you kidding me? Oh, dude. Oh my god. No, dude.
An unbelievable grind. Thanks to a combination of beat counting, incredible muscle memory, and a ton of skill, Bubsy had beaten Super Mario 64 blindfolded in under 40 minutes. This run had one big mistake. During MIPS, he got lost and had to quit back to the menu. It cost about 2 minutes, so a 36-minute run would be the limit. But there were no major mistakes anywhere else. 38 minutes was incredibly optimized for this type of run. It was exactly what he was looking for. Bubsy really was the king of blindfolded Mario 64. Hardly anyone else had tried it, and those who had were well behind him. He could do with his eyes closed what others couldn't do with their eyes open. And this 38-minute run was his magnum opus. Bubsy was finally done with the grind. No one else even approaching his times. And then, 3 weeks later, something very interesting happened. Completely out of the blue, a new submission appeared for the blindfolded Mario 64 leaderboards. The player's name was Nobori56, and he was claiming to have performed a 35-minute blindfolded run, a new world record. Nobody in the community had heard of him before, and having someone brand new instantly claim a big world record was suspicious, to say the least. And when the community watched his run, it only got stranger. He wasn't beat counting at all. In fact, it seemed like nearly everything he did was muscle memory. He looked an awful lot like he could see what was happening on screen, at least somewhat. Blindfolded speedruns can be easy to fake. If you can get any vision through your blindfold, it makes the run magnitudes easier. This was a tough one to call. Maybe Nobori was just an unbelievable blindfolded gamer. Or maybe he was a cheater. Over the following few weeks, Nobori continued submitting runs, and gradually, everything became clear. Nobori was 100% legit, and he was actually that good. So here's the thing with Nobori. He has an absolute knack for developing muscle memory. Once he does a trick with his eyes open, it doesn't take much practice until he can consistently do it without looking. Therefore, the idea of beat counting never even entered his mind, and he was able to perform nearly everything faster. Even right from their first movements in the castle, you can see the difference. Bubsy had to set up his moves and work his way to the first door, but Nobori adjusted the camera at the perfect moment to do this. Basically indistinguishable from a visual runner. How about getting to Peach's slide? Genuinely impressive, even with eyes open. It was more of the same with the stars. Nobori went for super fast strategies, no beat count setups necessary. Even though he died a few times, the time save for moving faster more than made up for it. But as you might expect, the place that Nobori improved the most was the Bowser stages. When Bubsy played Bowser in the sky, he kept moving but didn't do anything too flashy. Super impressive for being blindfolded, but nobody would mistake it for a speed run. Nobori, on the other hand, standing left side, and elevator skip. It's really hard to believe that all this is possible while blindfolded. But in case there's any doubt Nobori couldn't see, at the end of every run he took off his 18 blindfolds. No way anyone could see through all that. He was simply so much better than any other blindfolded player. He was running while the rest were walking. Nobori had achieved a 26-minute blindfolded run of Super Mario 64. Simply inconceivable just a few weeks ago. There's one more moment of Nobori's run I want to talk about. The final Bowser throw right at the very end. This throw had a few different strategies over the years. Bubsia's initial method was to just blindly throw and hope it hit a bomb. But Z-Surf realized that since the whoosh sound occurs at the same time in every spin, you could sync up your joystick to the spinning and know exactly when to release Bowser to hit a bomb. This was a strategy that Bubsia preferred to use, but Nobori took it a step further and used something else that Z-Surf had found. By pausing during the whoosh sound, you could listen to the echo and judge whether or not Mario is facing the bomb. If he's not, then you simply unpause and try again. But if he is, then you can immediately unpause and throw Bowser. It'll hit the bomb every time. This is a brilliant example of turning a seemingly impossible task, landing a blindfolded Bowser throw, into something relatively consistent. Even though he was miles ahead of everyone else, Nobori still felt he could save time over his 26-minute run. He died a couple times and had a particularly slow MIPS grab. So, a few months later, Nobori came back and improved the record to 25 minutes. A run that would have been even faster had he not failed to grab Bowser's tail and had to redo the fight. And just 2 days after that, Nobori made one more improvement. This run was truly incredible from start to finish. He collected the first 11 stars quickly, with no substantial time losses. He died once in Hazy Maze Cave, but it didn't cost him badly. His MIPS grab was instantaneous, right in front of the door. His Bowser stages were all fantastic, his BLJs were super quick, and on the last fight, he grabbed Bowser's tail and landed the third throw. No retries needed. 24 minutes is a genuinely respectable time with your eyes open. Nobori had optimized this run to insane standards. Hard to believe it was all actually possible. As for Bubsia, it was tough to accept what had just happened. He'd been the king of blindfolded Mario 64 for years, and Nobori had demolished all of his times. When Bubsia tried doing Nobori's strategies, he could eventually pull most of them off, but his consistency was poor. Definitely not good enough to complete a full run with them. Bubsia had to accept that he wasn't going to be beating Nobori's record. For the next year, blindfolded 16-star had no activity. There was no point when the world record was this good. Players focused on other categories with less optimized records. And unsurprisingly, Nobori took the top spot for those too. Just pure domination. But eventually, everything calmed down. Nobori stopped playing, and the rest didn't bother trying to beat his times. It almost felt like he had killed blindfolded Mario 64. But then, in October 2020, Bubsia managed to get 16-star into that year's Awesome Games Done Quick. This was the first time anyone would be showing off blindfolded Mario 64 on such a big stage. Bubsia may not have been on Nobori's level, but he wanted to put on a good show. So, he knew he had to get practicing. Bubsia didn't have any illusions of trying to take the record. Instead, he focused on playing for fun, looking for new strategies and not taking things too seriously. And maybe he can improve a bit on his 38-minute PB. Since Nobori's crazy muscle memory strategies were out of the question, Bubsia focused on beat counting strategies. He found faster ones in Womp's Fortress and Cool Mountain. And on Bowser in the Sky, beat counting allowed him to make a faster elevator cycle at the start. But despite lots of practice, he was still slower than Nobori and he was dying more. The improvements slowly started to come in. First, a 37-minute run, and then nearly a month later, a 35-minute run. Both of these had substantial time losses on the BLJs, so Bubsy knew he had the potential to go a few minutes lower. But this is exactly what he was looking for. Even if he wasn't competing with Nobori, it was still nice to see some improvement. And as the weeks passed, Bubsy kept getting better. His movement was faster, and he was dying less often. He started going for Lakitu skips sometimes. It wasn't very consistent, but getting it at all while blindfolded was amazing. Bubsy's potential was much faster than 35 minutes, if he could just string it all together in a run.
Fast mips, okay, it's very good. Okay, please BLJs, dude. It will come down to BLJs, dude. I'm up. Oh my god, this would have been sub 30, dude.
This was a fantastic run for Bubsy. He nailed nearly all of his strategies, and had he not missed a throw on Bowser and had to restart, the run would have been a sub 30. But still, it was a great improvement. He wasn't quite on Nobori's level, but he was getting closer. And even though it took months to get here, this was a clear improvement. Nobori hadn't played the category in a long time. Maybe Bubsy had the chance to close the gap even more. But instead, right after Bubsy's new PB, Nobori came back.
It's me, Mario.
He made it seem effortless. Nobori's strategies were somehow even faster than before. To get to the top of Womp's fortress, instead of teleporting, he jumped off the slope while sliding to make it up. He switched up a few stars and had a brilliant strategy to hit the Talon star in Shifting Sandland. And most importantly, it was just incredible that he was doing all this while blindfolded. Occasionally, he'd have a moment that looked obvious, like when he struggled to collect stars that were right in front of him. But he'd turn around the next moment and do something like this. Mind-blowing. Bubsy had improved, yes, but he was not on Nobori's level. It almost seemed like he could lower the record at will. But he decided to stop here. With the world record down to 23 minutes, Nobori had once again killed the competition in blindfolded 16 star. Bubsy knew he wasn't beating this. Nobody was beating it. So instead, he spent much of 2021 focusing on a new challenge, routing a blindfolded 120 star run. This was a massive undertaking, and took up most of his gaming time throughout the year. Yet, even though he wasn't playing the more competitive category in 16 star, working on 120 star still helped him improve at the game. He was optimizing the stars for speed, and as a result, found some new strategies. For instance, in Bob on Battlefield, he found a consistent setup for Bomb Clip, the iconic trick used to get behind the fence quickly. It saves 20 seconds, and looks pretty darn impressive given it's performed blindfolded. After practicing 120 star for several months, Bubsy came back to the game's shorter categories in late 2021, quickly sweeping through each one to lower his PBs. In 16 star, he managed to get a 28-minute run featuring his new tricks. Still slower than Nobori, especially in the Bowser stages, but a decent improvement. After this, he went back to working on 120 star, and Nobori's record remained as safe as ever. At this point, he'd held the record for more than 2 years. Bubsy hadn't been able to catch him, and nobody else was within 15 minutes of him. As 2022 came around, it was really seeming like this was Nobori's record to keep. He could simply do things with a blindfold on that nobody else could. At least, nobody who had tried so far. The only hope of beating Nobori was somebody new coming along, who had their own set of incredible blindfolded skills. Someone like Handyman. In late 2021, Handyman became infatuated with blindfolded Super Mario 64. That September, he became just the third person to beat the game blindfolded in under an hour. By January, his time was down to 35 minutes. And by March, he lowered his PB to right behind Bubsy. Impressive improvement from a relative newcomer to blindfolded gaming. Hendy's playstyle was like a hybrid between Bubsy and Nobori. He didn't beat Count with numbers, but didn't fully rely on muscle memory either. Many of his fastest strategies involved music cues. He'd mess around in a level with his eyes open and figure out how to time certain actions to the music. Eventually, he'd find a series of inputs that gave him the best consistency and practice it relentlessly until he could do it blindfolded. Hendy got really good at this, and it paid off with a 28-minute run. He fell behind Bubsy while collecting the stars since he died a few times, but he was actually faster than Bubsy down the stretch. It was gold split after gold split for Mips, Fire Sea, and Bowser in the Sky. After hitting the last throw on Bowser, he knew he had a big PB.
Let's go! Holy sh!
A couple months later, Hendy got on another good run. It started with both Lakitu Skip and Bomb Clip, and then he gained big time in Bowser in the Dark World. Unfortunately, he struggled and then died in Hazy Maze Cave, died twice in Fire Sea, and died on Bowser at the very end. That's 4 deaths. Yet he still PB'd by a full minute, and moved ahead of Bubsy into second place. Hendy had gotten really good. Despite several minutes of time loss, the rest of his run was so fast that he couldn't help but PB. Hendy's movement and speed was incredible, and it was honestly starting to look a lot like Nobori. The only thing he didn't have was Nobori's consistency.
Right, that's enough for today. 13 hours of recording. 1.7. I don't care if this takes me the rest of spring break. I'm gonna just finish this. It's better to be careful.